Welcome to another one of Samson's mailbag slash Saturday podcast. This one, not a true mailbag, and it's because as you're watching this, I'm in Chicago, so I'm not able to sit down and do the live stream. This is the only one for a long time. My apologies, but I am going to look at something really interesting, which is all of the Raptors transactions since roughly January of 2023, the start of that new year. So we have the Jakob Poeltl trade, all the big trades recently for the Raptors, actually. And the reason I'm starting there is because I did a video in late 2022 or early 2023 where I looked at all of the Raptors transactions post championship and tried to retrospectively be like, was this good? Was this bad? And what I found by doing that was at the time you could look back and say it made sense to do this, but what the Raptors completely lacked in that time frame was home runs. No home runs except for the Scottie Barnes draft. That was their lone big hit. And we're seeing them. It's obviously a big deal that Scottie was drafted there now. And what I want to do is look at what the Raptors have done since January 2023, kind of rate how they've been so far, some with a more discerning eye. Some of this you've heard me react to live. I mean, like the Jakob Poeltl trade, I went live at like 3 in the morning or whatever when it happened. A lot of the trades I actually went live for, but I'm going to give myself a little bit of 2020 hindsight vision. We're going to poke around and see how the Raptors did. That's what we're doing on this Saturday podcast. Thank you for tuning in with me. Make sure to like the video, subscribe, comment. We're trying to get to 12K before the new year. I just arbitrary numbers. Let's do it. Faster is better. I'm Samson Folk. Thanks for tuning in. Let's jump into it, man. So the first transactions are like Justin Champagnie gets released and Joe Wieskamp signs and then gets released, and he ends up signing like a multi-year contract with the Raptors but never sticking around. There's a bunch of 10-day two-way player churn. Like Jeff Delton had a season with the Raptors. DJ Carton is no longer with the Raptors now, right? Like all these guys show up and it's not of much consequence to the team. Even if it's obviously a huge deal to these players, it doesn't change much for the Raptors. The first big thing is the Jakob Poeltl trade. So what that is they traded Khem Birch, a 2023 second round pick, a 2024 first round pick, and their 2025 second round pick this season for Jakob Poeltl. That second round pick became Sidy Cissoko at 44th overall. The first round pick was the 8th pick, and it became Rob Dillingham, who was traded from the Spurs to the Minnesota Timberwolves for 2 future firsts. Jakob Poeltl joined the team, and at the time of this trade, like 3 a.m., I had just gone to Niagara Falls with my friends, I think the day before. I remember being like, wow, it's going to be fun to see Jakob Poeltl. I remember that trade in the wake of it that Fred VanVleet kind of reclaimed a lot of his value. He was much better as a point guard, facilitating with the screencraft of Jakob Poeltl. Jakob Poeltl and the Raptors, like they played at a 47 win pace for the rest of that season, and then they lost in the play-in, obviously, to the Bulls. Big game from Pascal, if I remember correctly. Tough game from Fred. A game that the Raptors should have won. They had a lead in it. Tough to see. I mean, Pascal went 1 for 3 from the free throw line, even though, if I remember correctly, right? Man, tough to say at this point in time. But the Raptors, my takeaway initially was like, Jakob's a really good player. We'll see what happens, but I don't think they'll be a good enough team to justify this trade. And I think even as Jakob re-signed and Jakob has kind of, I think, been so important to the development of this team currently, the Raptors did trade a lot for Jakob Poeltl. And I was not super excited for like the overall team building prospect of the trade at the time. But watching Jakob Poeltl, I enjoy talking to Jakob. I enjoy watching Jakob a lot. He really helps the watchability of these Raptors. But as far as like the team building standpoint, could the Raptors have used, the 8th pick in this draft and their second round pick this upcoming season and perhaps the 44th pick that ended up being Sidy Cissoko, who I guess they were kind of interested in based on what I was hearing. And did they need Khem Birch? I don't know. But I think I'm going to give this, because I do like Jakob a lot. And we're not talking about his re-signing. I guess we just got to grade it as is, like a C plus, a C plus. That's where I'm going to leave that one at. That's kind of like, I know some people will say, you should go higher, but I think especially with the way that the Raptors, they've had so many injuries, and hindsight is of course 2020. They tried to make it work with Pascal and OG and Fred, and they didn't. Bring Jakob on the team is a bit of a mismatch in the intention of the Raptors. And you have Jakob Poeltl, who, when he got traded to the Raptors, he said that he was excited to finally go to the playoffs again and he wanted to play winning basketball. And then he signed back with the team, 4 years, $80 million. And he said, yes, I want to go to the playoffs. And then the Raptors completely dumpster fire, new team. And then this past media day, he says, obviously, we're not attacking the championship. This team isn't going to the playoffs. It feels like a mismatch, and it's not perfect. The thing is, though, Jakob's a good player. It's just, was the juice worth the squeeze? No. But do I like watching Jakob personally? Definitely. So yeah, it's like C plus. Maybe that's kind of where I'll leave that one. That seems fair. But generally, you understand the Raptors were between a rock and a hard place in terms of like, I mean, do we try and bolster this roster that has not had a center for a really long time? And they didn't even play that well, and they played at a 47 win pace, and they thought they'd have something there, and they thought Scottie would take that big leap in his second. Like, there was a lot of stuff that the Raptors were planning for, and that came out of nowhere, and then them's the breaks. So after that, after the play-in loss and everything that goes along with it, Nick Nurse let go, fired. Darko Rakovic is signed as the head coach, and the Raptors select Gradey Dick at 13th. This kind of starts off their offseason, right? I think Darko has done a really great job so far. I think when the defensive personnel has been there, the Raptors have defended to it. I think that he's gotten hustle out of this team. I think he's gotten effort out of this team. He's got buy-in out of this team. They're playing a more modern offense that really helps get the most out of players. I've been pro Darko for, I mean, as long as I can remember. Like, he's, to me, the indicators I look for in a coach, he's been impressive. I know some people disagree with that, but that's okay. It's okay to disagree about basketball, of course. Darko, that head coach signing, I'm in like B plus, A minus range. That can go up to A plus though if he does a really good job as this team kind of rounds into form and health. Daggone, man, they've been so injured. And the Raptors selecting Gradey Dick at 13th. I did a ton of pre-draft work, covering the Raptors, guys that, they had worked out. I was the person who broke the news that Gradey Dick had been in working out with the Raptors and had come for 2 different workouts. And I went on a bunch of places and was talking about how I thought Gradey Dick was such a perfect fit with the Raptors. I rated him really highly, and largely because of how my scout friends talked about him, and they put me onto his film and what I should be watching for. And so Raptors selecting Gradey at 13th, the fact that he fell, we were all so excited on draft night. And Gradey in this sophomore season, I think, has really been proving a lot of that potential. There's some things we're still looking for, of course, but as far as what he's provided, what you can expect going forward, I do think at 13th, very impressive pick. And I know early on people wanted like Cam Whitmore or Keontae George or some guys who put up like quicker stats, but I think Gradey at 13th was such a fantastic pick, and I'll give that one an A plus. And then free agency rolls around, and all the talk is, and these aren't technically transactions, these are just guys walking, but Fred VanVleet goes. A massive contract to Houston. What was reported was that Fred was going to re-sign, or that what the Raptors were willing to go to was around 36 million. I remember Trey and I did like this mock negotiation where, I mean, I think we settled at around 29 million for 3 years, and that was the team winning because I think Trey was representing Fred. I don't even remember it exactly, but the fact that the Raptors went to 36 per and couldn't get Fred, I thought was like astounding. They obviously wanted Fred because they still wanted to keep that team together. You don't want to lose a good player for nothing. And Fred has been good in Houston and has really helped elevate that culture and the defense there. Houston has obviously been super fun this year, as much as Houston Rockets fans are still kind of lamenting watching a 3 for 11 game from Fred every 3 games or something. But he does help their team a lot, and they win his minutes big time. But the Raptors, you can't pay 40. The Rockets were in a position where they could just like throw the bag at them, see where it takes them. But the Raptors were so much more confined in what they were able to do, and part of that is like trading for Jakob. Part of that is like putting that pressure on the team, and then putting themselves between a rock and a hard place as far as keeping Fred on the team. And he walked, and so did Delano Banton, who I had asked Masai this question like, I don't know, like a week before, and maybe not a week, but I was talking to him before that, and he was saying how Delano was part of the future, and then they didn't even re-sign him. He just went off on like a nothing contract to the Celtics. And obviously now he's on the Portland Trailblazers. So a little bit weird. The Raptors, like the reported highest ask they requested of another team was Terrence Mann and a first from the Clippers. And the Clippers balked at that. They're like, no, we're not doing that for Fred VanVleet. So as far as like what the Raptors lost by allowing him to leave, and there was also kind of the rigmarole of like, well, we can't take a lesser package for Fred because we don't want teams to think we're weak, and that they can have these great deals with us on the other side, like politics, right? But yeah, Fred left, gone. Dalano, gone. And then the Raptors sign Jalen McDaniels on the biannual exception. And I will say, just flat out, terrible, but it actually ended up good, which is crazy. Jalen McDaniels, I thought, was truly, truly terrible. I know people looked at like a 26-game stretch where he shot the three ball well and said immediately that he was going to be a great shooter. That's not true. He also brought nothing defensively, really. He just couldn't find his way into rotation that was very open to be found its way into. Like, a good player could have got in there, an okay player, man, even almost an above mediocre player could have gotten into that rotation, and he couldn't. But then obviously he's part of a very good trade later on. So I haven't been giving grades, I guess. Well, the Fred thing, no grade, but Jalen McDaniels, the signing, given what he did for the Raptors and the fact that the positive aspect of what happened was more so like the cap crunch that the Kings were in. Jalen McDaniels for me is like almost like D maybe. He just was not good. Jakob Poeltl re-signing at 4 years, $80 million. That one, like we talked a bunch about Poeltl, what he's been able to do. I won't belabor this point too much, but B plus, A minus. It seems to me like Jakob Poeltl is the guy who he's going to provide that value for the full length of his contract. His defense, although it's kind of waxed and waned, we've seen a decent stretch this season, which to me is a very good indicator. He's obviously a tremendous asset on the glass, tremendous asset on offense as far as how the Raptors run their offense. 4 years, $80 million. It's like it in that circumstance back then, it seemed like a little rich, but Isaiah Hartenstein signed for 29, like the shark has been jumped. 4 years, 80 million. I mean, A minus for that, sure. Dennis Schroder on a 2-year mid-level exception. Not bad. Schroder, man, every time you talk about him, or I talk about him, I can't help but think like, man, what do you have? 4 years, 85 million he was offered and he turned it down. And then there's all those conversations about, it's has like most NBA players have like a sizable ego. And Dennis definitely views himself as like de facto point guard, the guy. And he was that with Germany. He won the World Cup MVP, even though France should have won it. And then that got people very excited about the prospect of Dennis Schroder. And then Dennis was more or less okay with the Raptors, but he didn't really jive with the Raptors' future. And also, like, when the Raptors made that trade later, Dennis having to go to the bench and that being like a super big problem, right? Like everything shifting away from that. In a vacuum, I think signing Dennis Schroder at like 12 million a year, like the MLE, is totally fine. Like that's a totally fine decision. And for what they were trying to do, it was totally fine. But as far as like looking at the finer details of what they ended up doing moving forward and how they wanted to manage the team and personalities, I guess like a C. And then they traded him so that they could get their MLE back, and it's all gravy. You know what I mean? Ron Harper, Javon Freeman, Liberty, Moget, like all these guys cycle through, and then we get to this point. I think it was November or December. Jontay Porter signs a 2-way contract with the Raptors. Oh baby, things are happening now. Like this sets in motion a Rico case. Can you believe that? A 2-way contract sets in motion a Rico case. And Jontay Porter, the thing is, I give the Raptors a B plus or an A. I give them a B plus or an A for signing Jontay Porter because he was good. He was better than a lot of bigs, than almost any big in the world that was available to sign to a 2-way contract. Jontay Porter may very well have been the best or top 3. The Raptors plucked him, put him in. He provided a lot to the Raptors until things starting to get a little funky. You start being like, why did you hit the backboard so hard? Why does the Jerry West logo have a concussion, brother? What are you getting up to? What's going on? Your knee hurts. Your neck hurts. After 3 minutes in the game, like all that stuff starts happening. And JONTAY, all the best to him, man. But I think the logic at the time was that JONTAY Porter, yeah, signed the two-way. He was good. Of course, we'd learn later, you could have been at the Raptors Republic live show and an unnamed guest started talking about all of JONTAY's investments. And then that perked me up. I was like, what? What's going on here? And then obviously that ended up being a lot more. It wasn't just investments. It was gambling. It was a whole bunch of stuff for JONTAY. So, yep, JONTAY Porter. I'll give it a B plus or an A minus. And now we get to a huge trade, probably the biggest trade. Like the Pascal trade is maybe the biggest, but this one to me is the biggest. So the Raptors trade on December 30th, OG Anunoby, Precious Achiuwa, and Malachi Flynn to the Knicks for Emmanuel Quickley, RJ Barrett, the 31st overall pick. That becomes Jonathan Mobo, and a traded player exception. As far as I understand, and again, I'm not like the big sources guy. That's not predominantly what I do, but when I put my neck out there on stuff I'm hearing, podcast listeners will know there's been quite a few things over the past couple years that you could trace it back to the podcast, like, oh yeah, he was early. As far as I understand, the year before, the offer that was being floated for OG from the Knicks was 3 firsts with protections on one of them and Evan Fournier. That was the 2022-23 offer that was being bandied about for OG Anunoby. The Raptors waited on that. And to my mind, they got a much better deal this time around in Emmanuel Quickley, RJ Barrett, and Jonathan Mobo. So to me, I loved the trade from the Knicks' point of view, and nobody likes trading away OG Anunoby. OG was, I think, personality-wise, the guy I liked best on the team. I always loved chopping it up with OG. I really like that guy. I like that man, and he's also just a tremendous player. Glad he got that big contract. But the thing is, the way that the Raptors were going, it's just OG. It was time. And what the Raptors got back for him in Emmanuel Quickley, RJ Barrett, and Jonathan Mobo, to me, extremely impressive. This was one of those, and I said at the time that I thought this was one of those rare win-win trades because the decision from the Knicks' point of view, I thought was completely perfect. RJ Barrett isn't a perfect fit over there. As we've seen, he had so much more to offer, but he just wasn't able to do it there. Emmanuel Quickley had a lot of cachet as one of those potential stars in waiting, and they leveraged that into OG Anunoby and Precious Achiuwa, who plays a meaningful role sometimes, depending on their depth chart. The Knicks, an A+ from their point of view, the Raptors, an A+ from their point of view, to get Emmanuel Quickley, to get RJ Barrett, to get Jonathan Mobo. We need to see Quickley healthy and playing to really get this out, but this was one of the true rare win-win trades, an A+ for the Raptors and what they were able to get. This next one isn't as easy an A+, and the true rating on it, I guess we'll see, not only because it involves Jakob Poeltl, not only because it involves a future first that, you look at the Pacers now, they're struggling so much. That future first could be much better, but the Raptors trade Pascal Siakam to the Pacers for Bruce Brown, Kira Lewis Jr., Jordan Nwora, the 19th pick that becomes Jakob Poeltl, the 29th pick in this past draft, which became Isaiah Collier, for anybody who's wondering, and Indiana's 2026 first-round pick. As far as I know, the offer in the summer between the Raptors and the Pacers, and because the Raptors were trying to trade Pascal in the summer, that's presumably why they weren't able to discuss any type of, contract talks with, Pascal. Of course, they could have talked to him otherwise, but contract is contract stuff, of course. Obviously, Masai said he came out in the press conference that he poorly handled his relationship with Pascal towards the end. But as far as I understand, the Hawks and the Raptors were engaged around a DeJounte Murray Pascal thing. And then DeJounte Murray, this is what I heard. DeJounte Murray really did not want to go to the Raptors. He didn't want to go to Toronto. The Pacers package, from what I heard, was that the Raptors are asking for Andrew Nembhard, Buddy Hield, and 3 first-rounders. The Pacers are saying something closer to like Andrew Nembhard, Buddy Hield, a first, maybe 2, something like that. They can't even go far on that deal because obviously this is the thing nobody can talk about, but Pascal has to say yes to that because no team wants to trade for him unless he's going to re-sign, right? Like you don't want to spend all that kind of stuff. So that package did not get better over time. It ended up, to my mind anyway, it ended up being Bruce Brown, Kira Lewis, Jordan Nwora, Jakob Poeltl, and a future first. I feel like Jakobi I really like. Like, I really like Jakobi. I've really enjoyed his start to the season. And you know what? I think that 2026 first round pick could end up being a lot better than initially expected. But like Bruce Brown has contributed basically nothing to the Raptors besides like, great vibes guy. I like Bruce. Great vibes guy. Kira Lewis, nothing. Jordan Nwora got some shots up, left. Jakob Poeltl is the big piece here. The 29th pick by extension is like a somewhat of a decent piece because it nets you Kelly Olynyk and Ochai Kelly. And then the 2026 first, I mean, I guess we'll wait and see. C plus, I'll say, and it can obviously get better with time, but I'll go C plus. Maybe that's too much. Maybe that's too little. I mean, you people will let me know. So the next trade, the Raptors trade Dennis Schroder. He's a malcontent at this point in time, right? Like he's having a tough time. They trade Dennis Schroder. They trade Thad Young. They use their traded player exception for Spencer Dinwiddie, who they immediately let go of. So this whole trade is just Thad Young. He's off the books now. He was a trade ballast. Even in his contract, it was 1 million becomes 8 million, depending on, if they convert him so that they can include him in trades, basically. And Dennis Schroder, if they get rid of him, they get the mid-level exception back. And you want a mid-level exception. It's an important part of team building. You go into the offseason with the full MLE, you have a lot more flexibility, right? So Dennis, I think that trade is just like guys are going out, nobody's coming back. Fine. B, it's just a salary dump. Whatever. It doesn't matter. The Raptors trade after that. The 29th pick, that becomes Isaiah Collier. Kira Lewis Jr., Otto Porter Jr., Otto retires. Kira is out of the league. And their other traded player exception to the Jazz for, get this, Kelly Olynyk, Captain Canada, and Ochai Kelly. At the time of this trade, oh man, I just remembered too, like during the Nets trade, when people said that Dennis Smith Jr. was coming back for the Raptors. And I was like, what? Dennis Smith Jr. is actually good. I thought this was a salary dump. But then Dennis Smith Jr. was not included in the trade. Yeah, so Ochai Kelly and Kelly Olynyk, this looked like a fairly ho-hum trade. Like, I think a lot of people were upset at it. And, the logic at the time, because Masai had openly panned this draft before this trade. He had said, like, do we want 4 guys from this draft? Not really, because he was like, this draft isn't that good. He didn't say that exactly, but he alluded to this draft not being that good. Said he didn't want 4 guys. He ended up taking 4 guys anyway, which is really funny. But he gets Ochai Kelly, who he believes in more than the average Bear. He also knows Ochai's family, and a lot of jokes were made about that. But given Ochai's start to this season, perhaps not that funny. The guy's shooting the leather off the ball. He's been one of the best low-usage role players in all of the NBA. And Kelly Olynyk has played 2 games to this point. He's going to play another game in an hour. I'm recording before the Heat game. And Kelly Olynyk has been, in my mind, like almost note perfect in his first game back. And then he's very ho-hum in his second game back. We'll see how that goes. But projecting into the future a little bit, Kelly helps. He's a facsimile of Jakob in that they run a lot of delay. They can run a lot of their pistol stuff and triangle concepts with him. And the Raptors look so out of sorts on offense when Jakob isn't there. This should provide like a ballast. It should really help keep the Raptors afloat. And so I'm going to give this trade. And they got their guy at 31, They like, and that's, hey, sources guy. But Before they drafted Mobo and Shamshay, I didn't have Shed, admittedly. They got their guy at 31. They liked Mobo a lot. So missing out on Collier, whatever. I mean, maybe Isaiah will make everyone eat their words or something like that, but I'm not completely certain on that. They also like Jacoby, who they rated higher than 19th. They liked Mobo. They got both their guys. Shamshay was definitely their guy. I mean, Jamal Shed was in there too. They got who they wanted out of that draft. So trading the 29th pick, I don't feel bad about. Kelly helps with the locker room, the culture, play style. Ochai, he's still like he's not young. And it looked shaky during summer league, but his start to the season has been so damn good. I might be up a little bit early because you want to let these things pan out a little bit longer, but I'm gonna give this one an A. I'm gonna give it an A. Ochai, woo, he's come around, baby. He has come around. Ochai is carrying this trade, as far as I understand. But also, I mean, the Raptors have been collecting slowly. You'll notice in all these trades, traded player exceptions, which will come in handy later on. We go through. That's the deadline. We hit the offseason, people. Guess who is available? Superstar Jalen McDaniels can be had. All you need provide is Davion Mitchell, Sasha Vezenkov, and 2 second-rounders. That's right. The Raptors traded Jalen McDaniels and 2 traded player exceptions that they collected over their many, many trades during this past season to the Kings for Davion Mitchell, Sasha Vezenkov, who never ends up joining the team, the Kings' 2024 second rounder, who ends up becoming Jamal Shed, and Portland's upcoming second round pick this year, which could be pretty good. In this draft, the Raptors select Jakob Poeltl at 19th, Jonathan Mobo 31st, Jamal Shed 45th, Ulrich Shamshay 57th. They bought the Shamshay pick, basically. That Jalen McDaniels trade, to me, A+. There's like, it doesn't have to be anything super fancy. It doesn't have to be like I've really liked some of the Davion Mitchell games. I've really disliked some of them, but overall I think he's been a positive. I mean, even by the numbers, like the Raptors, they do okay in his minutes, and how the Raptors like to attack teams defensively, he's been such a big part of that. But that's kind of where I'm at with that trade. A+. I'm gonna leave that at A+. It's such an easy, tidy piece of business. You know what else is an A+ piece of tidy business? Sober Carpenter, the sponsor of Samson's Mailbag, of the Pull Up Tray podcast, and we love them over here. In fact, this podcast is a presentation of Sober Carpenter and it's craft beer reimagined. This year, Sober Carpenter celebrates 5 years of brewing award-winning non-alcoholic craft beer. From hoppy IPAs to rich Irish Reds, they've got the flavor without the buzz. You can find Sober Carpenter at Sobeys, Loblaws, Whole Foods, Metro, Farm Boy, or delivered straight to your door at sobercarpenter.com. Cheers to 5 years of staying true to the craft. Sober Carpenter, crafted for those who sip differently. As I've said before on the podcast with Trey, not only am I a non-drinker, a sober person, but as a carpenter before I did this, I was building houses. So it's pretty, I guess, what's the serendipitous that this is the sponsor of the podcast. And also having drank a couple of them already, I mean, beer is not my choice. Not necessarily. I loved the cider. The cider was good. I told that story on the Pull Up Tray podcast where, I was kind of thinking about, oh my God, this is just like Christmas growing up. And I love a cider, an apple cider. That's my favorite so far. Looking forward to trying the rest. But yes, thank you, Sober Carpenter, for sponsoring the podcast. So we've given that, tidy piece of business trade A+. The Raptors draft overall, I guess I'll go one by I like Jacoby. I've liked a lot. I guess I gave Gradey the A+. I'll give Jacoby, and it's like, God, it's way too early to be grading draft picks right now. But hey, it's all cannon fodder anyway, isn't it? Jacoby, so far, I'll give an A. Sure. Jonathan Mobo, I'll give an A. I've liked a lot, especially from those two, from what I've seen. Jamal Shed. Now, nobody be upset with me, please. I am lower on Jamal Shed than I think a lot of people. There have been people who have found, I guess, like context to explain Jamal Shed's defense looking different than people might have expected. From watching I've watched every minute of him, a couple times. I think that like he struggled with the physicality. I think he struggled with getting around screens, and he hasn't been able to stick in front of guys the same way. He's fouled a ton. He's gotten beaten a lot, and he's not as impactful off ball as like a lot of those things I thought they might be given his reputation coming out of college. Now, some people buy into like, well, he's not in the right lineup or whatever else. I'm okay with any explanation that anybody wants for that. That's fine. I mean, we can disagree about basketball, of course, but Jamal Shed to me defensively has not really popped off to the same degree. And offensively, I know he had like the one game where he hit the 2 threes. That was super fun to watch. And the one was a step back. Like I'm watching that very closely, but basically his whole shot chart is just coming from like the short mid range. And he is not able to bend the defense meaningfully. I know aesthetically he looks kind of point guardy, but as far as what he creates for his teammates, there's like nothing going on. This can all get better, of course. He can improve as a shooter, which will help his playmaking. All of this stuff can turn around and progress forward. But so far, he played a lot of years in college, stepping into the NBA. He just doesn't have the offensive skills requisite to like justify being on the floor to me. And so there's a lot of development left on the table for players who get drafted. Jamal, we'll see what happens. And I know I'm going countercurrent because everybody loves Jamal. I like Jamal a lot. His game, less so at this point. A little bit negative, my apologies. But Jamal, I mean, I'll give a C. C, sure. I know it's like silly. We're giving grades, and Jamal could make me look stupid. And hey, like this could be clipped in 3 years if he's awesome. If he's awesome, congratulations, Jamal. Like I'm ecstatic for you. Ulrich Shamshay, I mean, I can't even rate it. He has so much learning to do about basketball. His body is still changing a bunch, Same with Jacoby and Gradey, to be quite honest with you, because Jacoby and Gradey are a great deal younger than Mobo and Shed, and Shamshay is as well. These guys are still figuring out who they are as people. Mobo and Shed are at least a little bit farther down that path. Yeah, Shamshay incomplete, not able to grade yet. Although many people reached out after the draft expressing like, hey, I watched, the NBA Academy stuff. I think the Raptors got one of the best big men. Like, we'll see in a few years. Hell yeah. I love to hear optimism about the players who I get to cover, but I guess we'll see. It's all up in the air. And again, these are too early grades for draftees. Honestly, like it's all too early. I mean, Jakob Poeltl, I've really loved his defense, and I believe in his shot. So the fact that he's shooting like 43% true shooting, and he shot 17% on unguarded threes, and just is like a 20% 3-point shooter right now, does that mean anything to me? Not really. Would I like it to be better? Yes, of course. But as far as I believe in him as a shooter, so it'll come around. What I wasn't sure on was the defensive impact, which has immediately been there. So, I mean, he could just end up not being a shooter. I don't think that's going to happen, but it could happen. It's the same thing with Gradey. Maybe it happens, but I don't think it will. I mean, this stuff can always just like completely come out in the wash. We'll see. The next thing is that Gary Trent Jr. walks in free agency. This was something that I was predicting for quite some time. Even though Gradey didn't have like a tremendous, like he had a bad rookie year, he came along at the end and you could really start to believe like, okay, this will work, that can work, all that kind of stuff. But as far as Gary, it signaled to me very quickly, like his time in Toronto is coming to an end. And it made sense. Like Gary, he scored a lot of points in Toronto for, a period of time. And then the Raptors offense kind of elevated beyond that. And then Gary was relegated to certain roles, and the Raptors wanted to try and elevate their starting lineup. And that meant that Gary was relegated again. And then they had younger players and were kind of being like more of a rebuilding team. So their priorities shuffled. And Gary, I said this many times while I covered him, like just the consummate pro, and so well liked and loved by his teammates. I thought he was he was a great guy to his teammates. He was the consummate pro. He helped bring guys along. He was a positive force. He didn't say anything like that. Like I said, Dennis Schroder being a malcontent, he was upset, very upset with what was going on, being demoted. Gary took that like he may very well have been, especially with the contract year coming up, having less shots, having less minutes, but he took it all in stride and just kind of focused his time and energy in being a positive influence on the younger players. And, all the credit to Gary. He ends up walking in free agency, and he signs with the Bucks for, gosh, hardly any money relative to what he's played for in the past. But yeah, Gary walks in free agency. The Raptors, their guard rotation's very young now. They have a lot of things they're trying to figure out there. But you watch Jacoby and Gradey play. You watch Jamal Shed get minutes, and Emmanuel quickly will need a lot of them once he's finally healthy. It made sense for the Raptors to open up those minutes, and there we are. And the big one, the most important one, the easiest A+, I think like even an easier A+ than the Davion Mitchell, Jalen McDaniels trade. Scottie Barnes signs the max extension. 5 years, $224 million. He will not hit the $275 million supermax extension. He's just not going to be healthy enough for all that. And so 224 over 5 years. I think he's making like 10.5 currently for this season. It jumps up to 39 million next season. The man is a star. He wins a lot of battles on the floor. Some shot making battles, a lot of creativity battles, but the battles he wins most often, to my eye, is on the glass and on defense. And he just provides so much pop there. And that's like, you pay that guy. That was the thing that was most disappointing about Pascal, and even OG before he got traded. The last month of OG's Raptors tenure was watching him dog it on defense, right? To my eye, that was unequivocally true that OG was not bringing it defensively, and for Pascal that became true as well. Pascal earlier, and OG all of a sudden, all at once before he got traded. Scottie helps so much on the defensive end. He could help any team. Just he will fill in, he will help, he will score, he will play make, he will defend like hell. There's still so much development left on Scottie's plate, and he will look different than everybody thinks. Nobody's going to be able to perfectly predict how Scottie's going to develop. I've expressed in the past how I want to see more driving prowess. Some people want more shooting. People differ, of course. Totally okay. But nobody truly knows what it'll look like in 4 years. But what I do know is that he's going to like bust his ass on defense, and he's always going to find a way to be not just impactful, but like majorly impactful. He's a max player, without a doubt, to me. 224 million, whatever, man. A+. You keep Scottie Barnes in the fold. He's obviously jazzed about it. The Raptors are obviously jazzed about it. Good. A+. Wonderful. The one that is not as easy to be like, yes, this rocks. Although the structuring of the contract, it reminds me a little bit. It's not as drastic as the Miles Turner contract, but it makes sense to me. Emmanuel quickly signs 5 years, 162 million. It's set at like 32.5 million flat every year. So it doesn't ascend. Some contracts descend, most ascend because to go up with the cap. But the Raptors, what they did smartly with this contract is that they knew they weren't going to be spending a bunch of money like this year or next. So while IQ's contract represents like a larger portion of the cap, just make it higher. It's not like they have to pay people. They don't have to pay people this year necessarily. Bruce Brown, his contract comes off either at the trade deadline or at the end of the season, whatever. The Raptors will have that money. And like when Scottie's jumps up, IQ's doesn't ascend with it. It's the structuring is really helpful to the contract. But as far as like just 162 million over 5 years, is IQ going to be like in that class of, Donovan Mitchell has been making like around 32, 33 million. Darius Garland, I think, is at 37. Tyrese Maxey. There's a bunch of guards. Drew Holiday makes around 33. CJ McCollum makes like 35. Most of the guards who have made over $30 million a year have been all-stars, but the cap is going up. We'll see what happens with it. But like year 5, when Emmanuel Quickly's 30 years old, going on 31. I expect him to be a good player. And 32.5 million might be really small in that cap environment. I don't know if the NBA is just able to print money every year like it's the money printing machine. I don't know. But I think that there's room for this contract to be like good. Do I think that there's room for this contract to be great? No. I've been lower on IQ than I think a lot of people. And that doesn't mean I think he's a bad player. I don't see, and I've been saying this since the Raptors traded for him, like I don't see an all-star game in his future. I have qualms about like his driving game. The defense was not as advertised when he came over, but he can get better at driving. The defense can come back around, and maybe more than anything, he's been an elite shooter, even with the ups and downs in Toronto, like health, teammates coming in out of the lineup. Like he's just shot the ball really well. He's a 40% 3-point shooter. He's been an unbelievable shooter off of screens. I did a film room breaking down like how he fits so easily into what the Raptors do offensively, how he can really help elevate so much of what the Raptors do. A lot of the unseen stuff and a lot of the play finishing stuff. He can just really, really provide a ton there. So IQ, you have to retain the guy you brought in. B minus, B minus, give it a B minus. That's what I'll give this as a grade. I know that's a little bit lower on IQ than some people want, and you know, when people are down on IQ, I feel like it's for a different reason than me. They're like, damn, he's injured all the time, like he's injury prone. It's like, well, players can't really help that. What I want to see IQ improve at is like these skills on the court, and I don't know. I never want to come off too harsh on a player. It's all just basketball anyway. If IQ sees this, I I'm sorry I don't rate your driving that much or your defense at this point in time. But yeah, that's where I'm at. Yap, 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 yap. And then the Raptors, they sign Jamison Battle, DJ Carton, Ulrich Shamshay as two ways. Bruno Fernando signs a minimum contract. It's churn, baby. Obviously, Shamshay represents the highest potential there. Bruno Fernando, I think, narrowly made it on this team as the vet minimum. Jamison Battle, I like. He's been pretty good. I mean, his release has to get quicker, but when he's open, he's been remarkably efficient hitting threes. The extra oomph on the glass has been really nice for Jamison. And like to his credit, it's not easy for two ways to come in and like make a pop. This Raptors team, based on how thin they've been, how injured they've been, of course, two ways are going to have more of an opportunity. But DJ, as much as I really like DJ, the person and the player, he just wasn't able to do it really. Like I liked his defense a lot, actually, at the NBA level. But he wasn't able to provide that offensive pop. He's been dealing with foot and ankle stuff. He's just in a tough position. All the best to him in his career. But Jamison has stepped in and has like given real NBA minutes and real winning NBA minutes. Not all of them, but some of them. That's huge for a two-way player. Shamshay, I mean, as I said before, we'll see. That feels like all the grades and everything. This is truly a yapathon. Yap, yap, yap. Just talking, chatting. Hopefully you think that this was a fair, I guess, summary of what the Raptors have done. I guess like some people will feel differently. Let me know in the comments. You even call me a dumbass if you'd like. If Blake Murphy is listening, because he loves calling me a dumbass, feel free to put in the comments Samson is a dumbass. We'll see. But yeah, thank you very much for tuning in. Hopefully, all the things I was pessimistic on, I look dumb for being pessimistic, and hopefully all the things that I was positive on, I look smart for being super positive. Thank you so much for listening. I'm Samson Folk. Make sure to like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff. Once again, we're trying to get to 12K. We're trying to grow the podcast and everything like that. We've had a healthy viewership for a long time, but we understand there's more people out there who we can introduce ourselves to. You liking, commenting, subscribing, it helps us do that. Thank you so much. All right. Whether you got into this in the morning or at night, have a blessed day and goodbye.